This video is very important. Remember that they are changing my voice. So recently, in Idaho, where I went to a behavior modification program, right? Around that area, there were 2 firefighters shot. I haven't checked the news. It was last night when I saw it in the news. And I haven't checked the news since then. And other people are said to be wounded. And there was also fire. Also, during a gay parade, I believe in New York, 2 people were shot there. Now, to understand what's happening, one has to look very carefully into the history of civilizations and the difference between heterosexual and transcendent Royal African Falcon martial arts and other martial arts, especially Western martial arts. Okay, now you don't have to get super in depth about every move and every word connected to martial arts, but you have to look at it where it matters most. So I'm going to list maybe 12 points here that overkill why the martial arts styles of the righteous beat the wicked by far naturally, but martial arts in their true form ends after my flesh dies. This is very much connected to the elite's belief that if they do all these terror attacks, that they can force conformity, they can pressure people into conformity, etc. Okay, and it's very much connected to the difference between Egypt in 3200 BC when it was founded, and Egypt in 2500 BC, okay, and other civilizations. So if you look at the history of civilizations from about 3000 BC to 2000 BC, and really the history of empires, because Sumer wasn't really an empire, it wasn't a very impressive civilization. They tend to put extras on that because they're white supremacists, and they know that they lost the Egyptian debate, okay, because it's not a coincidence that black people are obviously in Africa and Egypt at the time when it's started, when the pyramids are built, but they're not so much in the Middle East. They are in the Middle East, but they're not so much there. They're not so much in India. They're not so much in Greece and Rome and in Northern Europe. And of all the places where empires could have started, it was started in Africa and is connected to martial arts, right? It was martial art, falcon, warrior kings who founded Egypt. And the white man historically has lied about this pretty much first and foremost when it comes to history, because they know when they lost the civilization debate, when they lost the race debate over Egypt, that they lost the racial debate in general. And again, I'm not a racial supremacist, but this is key in what's going on here, because the white and Jewish heavy elite are the ones behind these shootings, and they're using technology, and I think a lot of people understand that now. When I used to talk about this maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago, people were very reluctant to admit it. Now there's so much evidence. So many things have come out. The Havana Syndrome, the recent MKUltra lawsuits in Canada that are bringing stuff back into the light, and so on and so forth. Okay. So to understand first and foremost why Africans were the greatest warriors, one need only to zoom in on 2 martial art animals, the falcon and the leopard. The leopard is a very ferocious animal, arguably more ferocious than a lion, and certainly a much greater hunter and a much wiser and smarter predator. The falcon is the fastest animal, and to strike at world record speed in a way that's fair and square and unbeatable, one has to have a certain African genetic structure. For example, Asian people, when they get taller, they tend to be lanky, right? They tend to be less coordinated. Look at basketball players, for example. Look at boxers, right? Now, the die has been cast. You have to look at it historically, because technologies and sabotage have changed things, and people evolve, and so the historical die is cast. It's not to insult anybody. I'm not a racial supremacist. I'm a moral supremacist anyway. So when we consider height and coordination and breeding and sabotage and technology and cheating, we see that I'm right about this. And this has everything to do with why they're shooting people and sabotaging people. Why the gay agenda? Why is it so much on the left? Why are minorities disproportionate on the left? And when they're right-wing minorities, they are complete sellouts. because everyone knows conservatism is evil. It's conserving Eurocentrism, ethnocentrism. It's conserving eugenics and scientific racism and social Darwinism and a lot of other principles that come from the governing class, principles of evil, like continentalism, manifest destiny, expansionism, and so on and so forth. If you have any questions about those words, they're not as hard as not as difficult as they sound. I can explain it to you. It just has to do with white supremacy and the different components of it, and how it all comes together, and controlling reproduction and so on and so forth. So when we look at that and we look at the fact that martial arts are about building character, and it doesn't take a genius to see, like it says in the Bible, that the righteous, they walk in the light. They don't retreat to a monastery. They don't just practice martial arts in the city and then go back to their neighborhood and kind of keep a low profile. No, they insist on what's right for everyone to see. And of those people that did that, I'm the bell that rings the loudest. Of all the martial art challenges that were ever made, mine is the bell that rings the loudest. And I strike at world record speed, and the wordplay in the black belt, which I've gone over before, also overkills the fact that I'm right. So let's look at these 12 points here. Point number 1. The wicked aren't wise or smart enough to understand the point of life. Well, how do we know this? Well, they're wicked, right? Proverbs 10:31. From the mouth of the righteous comes the fruit of wisdom, but a perverse tongue will be silenced, right? You know them by their fruits, by their works, by their deeds. Okay, and only from the mouth of the righteous comes the fruit of wisdom, true wisdom, moral wisdom. And people who are perverse in heart, those who pervert the course of justice, those who are perverted, etc., they are silenced by God when they meet their Maker, and they just cook. God gave them a mouth for now, okay, not a spiritual mouth in the afterlife other than their actions as they are in pain for eternity. Proverbs 11:30, the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and the one who is wise saves lives. These are universal ideas. These are proverbs that have universal application, whether you're atheist, agnostic, or monotheistic, polytheistic, what have you. Okay, so it's established that if you're really wise, which is what it takes to be the master martial artist, okay, there's no way to be good at martial arts without being wise. For example, imagine if an MMA champion, Chuck Liddell back in the day, John Jones, Rampage Jackson, Khabib, right? They're walking down the street, right? They confront me, okay, and say they have a gun, okay, and they're walking, boom, and I stab them up real bad, and the next time 5 times in the neck, boom, and I grab their gun while they're bleeding out, and, we're wrestling for the gun, they bleed out, they're dead, boom, done. There's one of many ways I could easily win. Well, what happened? Well, they relied on grappling and brute force. They didn't use their heads. And they kept listening to racists saying, bringing a knife to a gunfight until they got killed by someone with a knife while they had a gun. Okay, so who wins on the highest level of martial arts? It has everything to do with brain function, wisdom, insight, and sense. Thus the idea of sensei, right? Alpha sense, the essential alpha essence to sense the presence of God, the sense of the alpha, the sensei. Point number 2. Brute force fighting and brute force sex are animalistic and inferior, and they're connected. They are often promoted by rapists, and many of them connected to the spirit of rape. The word grape and rape are connected. Thus, when we talk about wine, right? People complaining and whining, right? The wine, the W-I-N-E, okay, and people, the wine people drink and the fact that people whine. We also get grapple and G-rape-L, and think about Greco-Roman wrestling, okay? These people used to wrestle naked in Greece and Rome. Maybe not every time they're wrestling. I'm pretty sure not every time they're wrestling, but they used to wrestle naked because it's a gay activity, and there's an emphasis on homosexual rape. Now, that wasn't always used that way. In Africa, quite often there were different forms of wrestling. There was a standing wrestling where you throw people down. There wasn't that emphasis on being gay. Okay, so there's some speculation into what groups were more gay than others and why. There's some factual evidence, but we're not going to get into that, right? But we know that Greco-Roman wrestling, naked wrestling, and pederasty were connected. And Olympic wrestling, or Mount Olympus, Zeus, right? And Zeus and Ganymede, look up the story of Zeus and Ganymede, how he molests the child Ganymede, and how Eros is depicted as a child, right? It goes back to Zeus being connected to Greco-Roman wrestling, Greek wrestling, and the pederasty, when they used to go court a child with chocolates and flowers. You're a male child, and they would teach him about life, and that includes hunting and fighting and so on and so forth. And that goes back to, that kind of gay thinking. It's part of why there's so much molestation in the Boy Scouts and the church, and sometimes in martial arts schools. It goes back to Greco-Roman pederasty, which is like the foundation of modern Western culture. If you have any questions about that or you don't agree, put in the comments so I can easily prove my point. Point number 3, one cannot be mature without being righteous. Think about it. Okay, being raised right, in your right mind, on the right path, versus being some kind of whiny, sissy kid who never grew up, who just is selfish. Point number 5, wickedness rots the soul, spirit, and brain where it matters most, including people who are too wicked to be willing to die for what's right. When you're not willing to die for what's right, you're just a brat that never grew up. Point number 6, it is harder to choose to commit to being a righteous man than to be another brute with false pride. I'm sure you understand why that is to a high enough degree here. I want to make this video shorter rather than longer. Point number 7, Satanists are everywhere, many of whom molest children. They try to make people brutes and betas. Okay, think about it, they're everywhere. Also, crest-wearing and Freemasonic Luciferians are common and boring. The word betas is beast scrambled, and the Bible talks about brute beasts as well. Okay, so that was point 7. So point 8 has to do with insight and sense. Think about the insight and sense. I went over this before, so we'll just skip to point 9. Prioritization, right? People who rely on wicked martial arts styles or wickedness in general, they have their priorities twisted. As the saying goes, they have their priorities fucked up. Okay, how can they have a better martial arts style? Martial arts about mind, body, soul, and spirit. Okay, just like Christ as a character in the story illustrated, you can be killed by someone else and still win the battle of life, or they lose the battle of life. So what does it profit somebody to kill a righteous man while being wicked? Right? They didn't prioritize what matters most. They were a waste of life. They're like dung on the ground, like the Walking Dead, what have you. Point number 10. The wise are righteous, and they commit to wise action. Kind of gone over that before, but that needs to be emphasized there. Okay, what should you do in life? Well, if you're wicked, you come up with stupid, wicked answers. You have wicked relationships, you breed wicked families, what have you. Point number 11. Sound judgment and mental clarity. Moral intensity increases sound judgment. When you're wicked, you're like a dumb, evil, low down, no good, dirty, rotten scoundrel. Spiritually dirty. Point number 12. Course and Godspeed. Okay, Godspeed. Fasting. Faster and master versus strong and wrong. Rhyme and reason. So as you're on the right course and you're moving in rhythm with God's plan, your life is much greater than a wicked person's. Pretty straightforward.